Ancient artifacts discovered in the deepest waters of the murky swamps. But they're all worth only a few pennies. That would suck if you were a treasure hunter. But with this deck, you get a mono blue artifact recursion synergy and a powerful long-lasting board state, with your graveyard essentially acting as a second hand. So let's make a deck using Emery, Lurker of the Loch. For 2 into blue, you get a 1/2 legendary creature Merfolk Wizard with this spell costs 1 less to cast for each artifact you control, and when Emery, Lurker of the Loch enters the battlefield, mill 4 cards. And it also has tap, choose target artifact card in your graveyard, you may cast that card this turn. There's also a reminder saying that you still pay the costs and timing rules and everything that still apply. But, you knew that. Our game plan is to run an artifact base to draw, ramp, and smash our way into victory. So let's start with the meat and taters of this deck, shall we? Chromatic Star is a 1 mana artifact with tap, sacrifice Chromatic Star. Add 1 mana of any color. And it also has, when you put it into the graveyard from the battlefield, draw a card. Meaning, since it makes a mana, you can essentially pay just 3 mana and draw 2 cards. It's not a bad turnaround, especially for just 3 mana. Or just use Wayfarer's Bauble. For 1 mana, you get an artifact with pay 2, tap and sack it, search your library for a basic land, put it on the battlefield tap, and shuffle. Keep recasting it and get more lands into play. Or just make use of the artifact Cultivate that is Navigation Orb. For just 3 mana, you get an artifact with 2, tap and sack it to search your library for 2 basic land and or gate cards. That can be important. And then reveal those cards, put 1 onto the battlefield tapped and the other into your hand, and shuffle your library. It is almost like you gave Cultivate a buyback for 2, or you can just get lands to hand with Traveler's Amulet. For just 1 mana, you get an artifact with pay 1, sack it, search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, and put it into your hand, and then shuffle. Each of these will get you ahead on land ramp, or just, help guarantee land drops. They do get a bit busted because after just a few activations with, ramp, they become not a problem to cast. And in mono blue, that becomes really good. And since your commander has a once per turn allowance for an artifact recursion, we can also use things like Mind Stone. Now I'm going to explain it a little weirdly because there is like a set of 3 cards that kind of do the same thing. So for 2 mana, you get an artifact that taps for, half the amount you paid for it. So in this case, 1. Then you can pay half the amount it costs, 1, tap and sack it to draw a card. You can also do a similar effect, but larger with Hedron Archive. Costs 4, but taps for 2, pay 2, sack, draw 2. And then finally, Dreamstone Hedron. You pay 6, but it taps for 3, and you can pay 3, sack, and draw 3. Most of these usually do stay around because they're pretty good rocks just for the mana alone. But with our commander, that option to draw those cards becomes a lot easier to pick since we can just get it back for mana, if we really do need to. We can make it way easier to choose by just increasing the number of times we can activate our commander. To utilize that, we use a bunch of cards like Irith, the IRS is coming for your taxes. IRS of the Healing Throne. For just 2 into blue, you get a 1/4 legendary creature, Human Cleric, with tap, untap another target creature, or tap, untap up to 2 other target legendary creatures. You don't have to necessarily wait till the very last minute, like right before your end of turn or anything. You might just be able to immediately cast something and just polish off one of those new artifacts and then find it again and then just cast it again and keep getting use out of these utility artifacts. Or you can even recur some important creatures. Truly, the possibilities are not endless because eventually you'll run out of options. And infinity is just a concept that human minds are unable to truly understand, and to pretend we can is to speak blasphemy. But if a blasphemer like you wishes to continue on this path, we can get into a few key fun cards before we get into those beaters. Riddlesmith for just 1 and a blue lets you loot for every artifact you cast. That's good. I mean, our graveyard is essentially another hand, so when we draw a card and discard a card, that's really almost no downside for us. That's just going to get through more of our deck for everything we cast. We can also use cards like Smelting Vat to just cheat cards into play. Let's see if I can do this in one breath. For 4 mana, you can pay 1, tap and sack another artifact. Then reveal the top 8 cards of your library. Put up to 2 non-creature artifact cards with total mana value less than or equal to the sacrificed artifact's mana value from among them onto the battlefield, and the rest onto the bottom of your library in a random order. Oh, I can do it. Okay, we don't have to sacrifice a non-creature artifact, but this does prevent them from getting non-creature artifacts into play. But since we can just recur the creature, just allows us to get our biggest sack, and then we can just cheat whatever else we wanted to play with things like, I don't know, Master Transmuter. For 3 and a blue, get us a 1/2 artifact creature human artificer with pay a blue, tap it, return an artifact you control to its owner's hand. Oh, you may put an artifact card from your hand onto the battlefield. Not only does this card help just cheat anything you want into play, but it can also be done at instant speed. For as long as it remains 50 cents or less, we should absolutely be taking advantage of the power of this card. And finally, some of the big finishers we have in this deck can really help us move out some great big power and push our opponent's life totals to like 0. Phyrexian Triniform is a 9-mana, 9/9 artifact creature Phyrexian Golem that just wants to die. Relatable. Am I right, millennials? I'm alone. When it dies, you create 3/3/3 artifact golems, and it has Encore for 12, so if you ever feel like it, you can just, exile it from your graveyard and create a copy for each of your opponents. Each of those copies has to attack another one of those opponents, and at the beginning of the next end step, you sacrifice them. That would create 3 of those 3/3s for each opponent you have. That's pretty awesome. You also get things like Metalwork Colossus. Costs 11, but it costs X less for the total mana value of non-creature artifacts you control. So if you have the Hedron Archive or the Dreamstone Hedron or whatever that is, that's 10 mana alone, and it will cost only 1, and anything on top of that, it's free. You can also sacrifice 2 artifacts to return it from your graveyard to your hand, but you don't need to really do that, so you can just tap the commander and cast it again. Then we also have Antiquities War. For 3 and a blue, you can get an Enchantment Saga. I know. It's an enchantment. It has the first 2 parts of an ability I really don't care about. That last part will turn all of your artifacts into 5/5 creatures until end of turn. Meaning if you have a board state full of just utility, you can turn it into death. It's gonna be exactly what you need to finish out the game. Now, a few final thoughts before we wrap this up. First off, lands are gonna be one of the things I probably won't talk about. If you wanna see what kind of lands I run, you can go ahead and check the link down below. That's where the deck list is. It's mostly basics. I don't think that there's any real reason to run anything other than basics in a monocolored deck. Sorry. But other than that, a lot of these cards in this deck, they are really inexpensive. When I build these decks, I look at for what's 50 cents or less at the time of me building it, and then I'll present it to you looking at exactly, here you can have this will run here. And honestly, it's kind of a crapshoot, but this one does run pretty well because it gives you the option to essentially play different games however you choose to play it. If you have any ideas for cards that would go great in this deck, honestly throw it in. And especially if you can afford those more expensive cards or already have them, great, use them. And I honestly recommend that you at least give it a shot and try it as it is. It is pretty fun to run. It'll get you a lot of great value out of those artifacts that normally you just use once. Because imagine how many lands you're going to get if you keep recurring that Wayfarer's Bauble, just for a couple turns. Get more untappers, well now you have an untap synergy. If you can get a legendary untapper, other than IRF, you can get an infinite amount of things out of your graveyard as long as you can cast them. Not truly infinite. We know. That's all I got for you today. I just recommend you check out this video if you want to see another great and powerful deck. This is what YouTube thinks that you're going to love out of my channel, and I do think you will as well, because I believe in you. Yes, you. If you're still here, subscribe. Like the video. Please? Please? Julia? Please?